Welcome in, everybody, to the Chicago Football Show. I might look a little different than who normally introduces our show, but I'm Carmen Vitali. Scott Bear is off. I have two wonderful people with me. Mike Norman, as always, our fearless producer, but we are so excited to have a special guest with us. Paul Allen, voice of the Vikings on The Fan in Minnesota, does all of the broadcasting radio things. Dear friend of mine, we are so excited to continue our Rivalry Recon series on the Minnesota Vikings with Mr. Viking himself. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hey, thank you very much for having me on. I'm in my announcer's booth at Canterbury Park in Shakopee, Minnesota. It's what brought me to Minnesota full time in 1998 as a racetrack announcer, which I've done 33 years. That's the intel. The good news is we have Woodford
Ooh.
bourbon. We have
Oh,
Woodford
that's the
bourbon
good
here
stuff
in the
right there.
booth, and it's voluminous. I mean, I got like 3 bottles in case we ever hit the right pick five. But thanks for having
That's
me.
the Of course, that's the right deal to strike, like right when you start off, man. That's fantastic. And you need it for the winter months in Minnesota as you do in Chicago. But thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited. This is kind of the dead period. This is the time when everybody takes vacation. You mentioned to me before that this is kind of the time that you take your vacation days. So we really appreciate you carving out some time for us. But what an off season for both of these teams. We've talked in depth about the Chicago Bears and how much they remade this roster in Ben Johnson's image. But if there was a team that kind of kept up with the additions and really fortifying their roster, I think it has to be the Minnesota Vikings. I loved everything they did this offseason from free agency to the draft. What was kind of your take on everything? What's your favorite addition? What do you think this roster looks like now, and what are the expectations we should set for it?
That's a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
it
is.
this will be, I think, my 24th year calling Vikings football. So like it's I'm blessed to have this job, especially how I got it by auditioning. But it's the longer you do it, it's more difficult or different to find things that really, really charge you up early in the year. Now, once we get going and you're winning a bunch of games, that's great. And the point being is, while through the draft of Donovan Jackson from Ohio State or some of the free agents added, like, I still can't figure out how they got Jordan Mason. I mean, I love his game
I
and
can't either.
they didn't really pay that much. But through all that, and this is not strictly because, I'm doing something called Chicago Football Show with a Bears bent. The first game of the year at Soldier Field on Monday Night Football, I'm more excited for that season opener. I'm the most excited for a season opener I have been since Favre got here in 2009. And they went to Cleveland, and Percy Harvin scored his first touchdown. And, we got to see what Brett could do simply because of my level of respect for Ben Johnson and the way he did things in Detroit. And the fact that Brian Flores is an elite defensive mind. And it's a division game. Soldier Field's cool, whether people think after the remodeling it looks like a spaceship or whatever. It's still Soldier Field. They're still the Bears. It's still the bomb. And this one really, really excites me, specifically given JJ McCarthy, the new quarterback, has Illinois roots, and it's going to be his regular season debut. I mean, this thing's good enough to eat.
Uh, I mean, Paul, you got me fired up already here. I mean, I'm ready for week one too, just especially the way you're describing all these storylines. And that's really what I was going to kind of ask you about is the JJ McCarthy storyline coming back to Chicago on prime time, potentially making his, debut. Is that the juiciest storyline or that Ben Johnson, Brian Flores matchup that you described? I look back into the Lions and Vikings matchup the last 2 years. The Lions
Mm.
average over 30 points in each of those matchups. Well, what's the kind of the biggest matchup that you're kind of looking for? Is it JJ McCarthy on your
Well,
side, or is it going
bruh,
against Ben Johnson?
that's. I mean, I'm not trying to turn this. Carmen, cover your ears. I'm not trying to turn this
Uh-oh.
into a shoe size contest, but I mean, to say what you said and not recognize, oh, there's Jameer Gibbs. Oh, there's Amon Ross St. Brown. Oh, there's Sam Laporta. Oh, the artist formerly known as the sled dog with the Bears, David Montgomery, now all of a sudden is fleet of foot with the Lions. So I got a lot of respect for David. And oh, by the way, Decker over to Sewell, despite, minus Ragnow. I think that has to be, contextually speaking, part of the equation with Ben Johnson, but we digress. The thing
Oh, no doubt about
is
that.
that,
I would throw out just in that sense. Obviously, Ben Johnson is going to be with a new team. There's going to be a lot of
mm,
storylines with that, but
yeah,
a lot of people are expecting him to
we've gotten
bring big
killed by the
things.
Lions. Are you kidding me? I
Right.
mean, I'll never forget. It was Zimmer's final year. I think it was 2021. And we're at Ford Field late in the season. It's December. And Amon-Ra St. Brown walks off on the Vikings back left of the end zone. Cam Dantzler's not on the team anymore, just complete L with that play. I wasn't excited like for as a Lions fan in doing the game winning call for the Lions on the Vikings radio network. But what hit me was these guys haven't won a football game in a year. And because of the pandemic, these fans, about 75% full, and it was loud, they haven't seen a win in nearly 2 years. So it's like after the game, and we're not going to the playoffs anyway. The team wasn't that good. So I was like kind of happy that the Lions won the game. And it didn't go over well with certain people in the purple and gold covenant. So that's the team we're discussing here when you tell me, they're running up 30s and Darnold is just basically coming up with the worst game of his career in the biggest game of everybody's regular season career. So I like the Lions. I always have. That's the target at which to shoot in the division. And yeah, you're right, man. We can't beat them of late. So I guess fortunately the Bears and Packers are on the schedule. I'm just kidding. But catching them in the first game, that's a problem. Okay. Ben in his first game, like I think it was 2016, we went to San Francisco at Levi Stadium and played Jim Tomsula, who was coach of the San Francisco 49ers. We caught him in his first game. Nobody had any idea what the elevated defensive line coach was going to do. So what did he do? He lined up four tight ends and either Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert or Tevin Campbell, like those guys, every single play and just trucked us. And we left beaten up and as a big favorite losing the game. Kaepernick was really good in that game too. Well, what happened the next week? They had film on Tom Sula. He goes out to Heinz Field. Tomlin puts 50 on him. And they had an awful season because they then had film. So this is a disadvantageous time to catch Ben in his debut, especially as crafty as he is. But Brian Flores got some good players on his side too. So I guess, and by the way, the Vikings do run good offense with Coach of the Year Kevin O'Connell. So man, I'm excited. It's not even mid July, and I like to ramp the crescendo. But that first Monday night game at Soldier Field, we could do that thing right now, and I'm ready.
If this is as loud as it is in mid July, I can't imagine what the actual apex of the crescendo is going to be once week one actually rolls around. But I want to
Mm-hmm.
ask you a pretty straightforward question. Their biggest question mark with the Vikings is, as you mentioned, JJ McCarthy. Biggest question mark with the Bears is what is Ben Johnson like as a head coach? We don't know that. Which of these question marks is the
Mm.
bigger impact or is the bigger advantage for the opposing team?
Yeah, the only thing personally that I would change with that is I still think the biggest question with the Bears is the quarterback. I mean, when you take somebody first overall, that has to hit at an incredibly high level. Can Bears fans say it did? All right, so now you got Ben coming in there. It's only going to help. And yes, running the whole team as a head coach, it's not for everybody. There have been really good coordinators who have fizzled out. I don't know if it's going to work for Ben or not. I just know he's super smart. The McCarthy side of it, I mean, you nailed it. It's no matter all the storylines that come up to this game, he's a first round pick and they traded a lot to get him. And then they liked him in their preseason game against the Raiders. And from under the cover of darkness, we're hearing about an injury that nobody seems to know when it happened during the game. Tough kid played through it. He's a hockey kid, and that's what they do. He's a hockey kid in his heart. But well, then he's gone. Now he's on a scooter at the facility in like October, November, December. So what does he have to offer? Forget against the Bears, period.
Right.
And during organized team activities, when they really threw a lot at him, I can't imagine, everything went exactly how everybody thought it would go. But when they get back for training camp in a couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks, And then the joint practices against the Patriots, two of them,
Mhm.
those are going to be super important for McCarthy. But the underrated facet with this talker that, fans and like maybe local or national media, I don't think bring up enough for what it's worth, is this is a high end coaching staff here. You don't become coach of the year and win all these games O'Connell's winning if you don't have a bunch of smart coaches on your staff. Just focus offensively with the offensive coordinator, Wes Phillips, Josh McCown, the quarterback's coach. He's going to be a head coach one day. Ends coach, Brian Angelico, he like runs the red zone offense. He's so smart. So there are more, but it starts and stops with Kevin, and they will not put McCarthy in a position, no matter the situation, that's going to compromise his improvement. So the coaching staff kind of manipulating how the start goes and knowing where the bones are buried with him and kind of keeping him out of trouble. That's underrated, and I think it's going to matter.
Yeah, I think the coaching staff obviously is always going to be underrated, especially when you look at how fans perceive football, right? It's hard to kind of quantify from a fan perspective how much good coaching can really impact a team. But from a
Yeah.
Bears fan perspective, to see what KOC has done in his time with the Vikings, there's just got to be a lot of respect from around the league, but also within that division. I think that the NFC North is one of the stronger divisions within coaching. And then potentially, obviously, we talked about bringing in Ben Johnson into that mix. From a Bears fan perspective, it's like you got to keep up with a coach like KOC or like Matt LaFleur or with Dan Campbell in Detroit. So how would you kind of describe the
Mm.
coaching, the coaching in the NFC North and maybe how that is different than other coaching staffs around the league?
Yeah, I love that take because the North's AFC and NFC, I mean, it could be argued they're the best two divisions in the NFL. And by the way, they play each other this year. So, I mean, take the McCarthy / year two of Caleb Williams a step farther. And now, like the Vikings, finishing second in the division, we hook the NFC East, so do the Bears. So, I mean, we get Jalen Hurts and the Eagles here. You get the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, it's the schedule for these teams are unbelievable. So you need good coaches. You need coaches who know how to keep teams fresh, specifically in November and December. Kevin's made it an emphasis point this offseason, speaking publicly about, it's almost like Bum Phillips back with the Oilers when he was kind of like, we're used to banging on the door, but now we're going to kick the SOB down. He kind of put it like, they've got the culture and the team so that it's good through December. Now we got to get better in January is pretty much the way he's put it. So kind of back to Carmen's first question. I don't really have a favorite addition, but Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Donovan Jackson now manning the middle of the offensive line. I mean, it's not a sneaky tell. I mean, it's a tell for everybody to see. We need not speaking for the team, but we got to do a better job in the middle, protecting and running through the middle. It's like when Gary Kubiak was here. I think it was back in 2019, and I was watching practices, and he was implementing the zone read and the movement game with the nimble offensive linemen like Brian O'Neill and Garrett Bradbury, and Dalvin Cook was the running back. And I'm like, okay, this is cool and it's beautiful. I mean, the boots and everything. This is stylistically sound. But what are we going to do when it's third and short against Eddie Goldman and Keem Hicks and Kenny Clark? How are you going to move them? And that proved to be a problem point. So I think they fixed it. They think they fixed it. And then you just have to counter these elite coaches that are coming at you. But the coaching standpoint for the Lions, I mean, it's not homerific to wonder, oh, geez, you lost your offensive coordinator, who everybody loves, and he's super smart. Your defensive coordinator, I think the passing game guy's gone. Hank Fraley, who used to coach here, he's the bomb. He's the offensive coordinator for Chicago. I mean, so many key coaches have left. So am I supposed to believe it's just going to go like that and go 14-3 or 15-2? If it does, it does. But they get Aiden Hutchinson back, so that might answer all the questions.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more too about these rosters and the Vikings roster in particular, because it alluded to it where I love their offseason. I love that, especially the additions along the interior of the offensive line, because before Christian Darrisaw was hurt, I mean, Darrisaw and O'Neal are one of the best, if not the best, tackle tandems in the league. I truly believe that. But it was the interior and the fact that they had to take so much attention away to compensate for what was happening inside that they were a little bit less effective. Then Christian gets hurt, and it all goes to what. But this year, coming in with that, I keep finding myself saying that the Minnesota Vikings have almost quarterback proofed their team. There's no such thing as actually quarterback proofing a team, but they have surrounded JJ McCarthy with so
Yeah, that's
much
nice.
talent and so much insulation that allows for the learning curve that inevitably comes with a quarterback making his first NFL starts. And
Mm-hmm.
that coupled with the coaching,
Yeah.
I think the floor for this team is so much higher than people are giving it credit for. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing that you agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it comes to like what people are counting on. Um, I'll look at the wins total that Las Vegas or constituents put out because that involves real money, people formulating opinions, people winning, and people losing money. And last year, when it was 6.5 and it went to 7, I mean, that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. That team walking on the field with or without. I mean, it's like forget the Darnold opinions where I got so frustrated. I was like, "Bro, do you really think he's throwing the ball to Robbie Anderson and Ian Thomas?" I mean, that, with all due respect to those guys, these guys ain't them. And
No.
and that ended up bearing its fruit. This year it's around 8.5, 9, very fair. With the NFC North, and the Bears are going to be better. Packers will be the same, still good. Lions are going to be tough. Yeah, that's still fair. So, but from a public standpoint, and whether they're up or down on the Vikings, that's really generally elevator music to me. I
Mhm.
just know how they put this thing together. That NFLPA players thing, like when we're at the
Yeah, the
combine
survey.
and it pops
Yeah.
and they always finish first, second, or whatever. Well, that's real. And culture
Yeah.
is an overused, trite word in personal lives, homes, and in sports and businesses. It's not here. I mean, I'll just lay it out like this. At the end of the 2021 season, and I don't work for the Vikings, I'm kind of a hired gun 1099 to do things for them. I get paid to, yeah, 1099, by the way. But I get paid by KFan and iHeart to call games. So with that said, at the end of the 2021 season, I was so disenchanted being around there that I actually reached out to the Wild and said, "I've never called hockey in my life. Is there any chance I can call 2 games from a suite and we got a bunch of people around there and we can make it fun and like tweet it?" And they said yes. And then I did them, and God put me on a couple of good ones. Now, I didn't really have any desire to do hockey radio play by play, but the point is that the NFL, this beloved shield, may be everything to you. It's not to me. And happiness and peace at this stage of my life matter a lot more. And I'm the announcer, so it's not like a lot of it would come at me. It was just the way other people were treated. I just didn't dig it. So I tried to get out of the job and they wouldn't let me. It's not that they wouldn't let me. They were just like, "Hey, meet Kevin, meet Quasey, come on in," stuff like that. And I did, and I fell in love with it again. The 2022
Mhm.
season was about the most fun I've ever had in my life calling Vikings games. So that needed contextually to be laid out, just kind of to look at it, just looking at the finer points of things when you come into a season and what expectations are. The expectations are Kevin O'Connell and others know how to win a Super Bowl. And this team hasn't been to the Super Bowl in 48 years. And this market hasn't hoisted a core four trophy in since 1991.
Mhm.
So he that bugs him, and he wants to win, and he wants to win for the fans. I think it bugs him because people here have kind of gotten the culture of, oh well, great season, ran into McVay's team with Jared Verse and all that. That's just how it always goes. Oh, Shea Gilgis Alexander, that's how it always goes. Well, he doesn't want to hear the "that's how it always goes" anymore. So they'll be ready, man. They're going to win a lot of games, and if they don't, they're going to give teams a lot of headaches.
Well, thanks again for joining us, Paul. And you obviously, you got your pulse on the Minneapolis sports scene out there, and there's a lot of stars. And I think, Chicago in general haven't had that much success within the core four sports, like you said, for Minneapolis. But at least Minnesota has some stars. You got Anthony Edwards obviously doing his thing. And you got Justin Jefferson, maybe one of the biggest stars in the NFL there as well. a lot of people here, love to compare Vikings receivers. Obviously, people are still traumatized by what Randy Moss did to the Bears for all those years with Minnesota, and obviously what Justin Jefferson is doing these days with Minnesota. How would you compare those two guys specifically as stars within the city and even in the NFL as well?
Great question. The When Randy was a rookie in '98 and he went about the same spot Justin went, Randy was supposed to go a lot higher. Maybe Justin was too, but the 2020 wide receiver draft probably is the greatest in the history of the NFL. '98 was not. Randy was polarizing because Randall Cunningham took over at quarterback. That wasn't supposed to be the case. And then it was like, it was one of the greatest shows on turf really before the greatest show on turf. Justin's different than Randy in that he's not really as big. He's not as burly up top. He beats you different ways. And I've never seen him one time run down the field and put his hand up like this, like, come on, you're an idiot if you don't throw it here. It's impossible to draw a comparison between those two. Randy's HOF, Justin should be HOF. They're both phenomenal.
Well, they're both
I
obviously
it's
fun to watch, unless you're on the other side, which unfortunately Bears fans have been. But a lot of fun to watch, obviously, just for NFL sake. You can't be wide receivers that make plays like that. And it's funny, Paul. Actually, before just doing a little, kind of going back, I listened to your call of the Justin Jefferson 97-yard touchdown play from this past season. Unbelievable call for yourself, but also unbelievable moment. And just your energy, Paul, is just infectious. And I know before when we were talking to you, before we set up this interview, you kind of said you're maybe off the Harry Carey limb of broadcasting. How would you kind of describe your broadcasting style? And, how do you keep going after all these years and stay that enthusiastic about your job? Because it is a joy to listen to. And the highlights that you produce they're really what, kind of drives NFL fans' interest in the game.
You're really, really nice. Thank you. I didn't go to college. It's a gift from God that I have this job. I mean, I auditioned for it. I lost. I did fan line. I didn't rip the guy who was doing it, even though I didn't think he was very good. Then they gave me the job in 2002, and I've held it ever since. From an energy standpoint, so I just have a high level of respect for the totality of that story. And when it comes to the fans, because when I forget that people consciously turn on Vikings football, they have to make that decision. Now, they're not there for me. They're there for the team, their bets, fantasy football, things like that. But I've been part of it for a long time. In fact, all of some people's lives, and they don't turn it off. So I'm there to serve those who take time to listen to it. If Carmen has a distraction in her life and she ain't liking something and she turns it on, I want her to forget that distraction through the energy and the childlike enthusiasm, despite age 59, that with which God blessed me. So I'm just very in tune with what He's given me, and I tried my best to unfurl it authentically. And when you have a crowd around you and it gets loud and the action is live, I mean, that right there, that's super exciting. So that seems to bring out the that side of me. On the other side, I'm pretty quiet personally. I don't read the Bible a lot, speak to a lot of Christian high school fundraisers and churches and things like that. That's what I really love to do more than anything in the world. It's my identity. But but when it comes to calling football games with that crowd and everything, that's where it comes from.
I really think that as someone who's now covered the Vikings for quite a few years now and been to plenty of Vikings games, it's if you're ever thinking of making a road trip, Bears fans, don't overlook Minnesota because it's one of the best game presentations I've ever seen. And I've been to every NFC stadium, most AFC stadiums, with fake snow, the way that the crowd goes into it. And you mentioned the fans, Paul, and I really want to talk a little bit more about just how much this Vikings team means to the fans, despite the fact that, just like Chicago, they haven't seen a whole lot of astronomical success. They haven't reached the mountaintop. it's one of those things. How passionate this fan base is such a reflection of the city. And it's such a, I feel like all four of these teams in this division are just, the fan bases are so incredible, and it makes it so easy to want to cover these guys and root for these guys. So how do you balance all of that, because it's so easy to get swept up in?
That's so beautifully put, and here's why. Because having seen these stadiums like you, and having seen them as long as I have, I mean, my very first regular season game I called in my life was in Champaign, Illinois, because of the renovation of Soldier Field.
Yep.
It was like 110 heat index. Jim Miller hits David Terrell back center of the end zone in overtime, and we lose. And that's my indoctrination to the NFL. So then I got to Soldier Field for the first time next year. That's '02, and that's Moss against R.W. McQuarters. And oh, by the way, who's that rookie from Louisiana Lafayette that's unbelievable? Oh, they call him Peanut? So I'll never forget Peanut Tillman, man, one of my all-time favorite players. But Soldier Field has always been loud. Okay, if they're winning 5 or 6, or if they're winning 12 or 13, that place gets loud for an outdoor stadium, especially when that bear comes out there and gets all aggressive. I mean, when Devin Hester used to run out on the field and the Soldier Boy song would come on, whoa! I mean, I'll never forget that. Well, Lambeau Field's one of my favorite stops. It's we stay
Yeah.
40 minutes away from the stadium. It's immortality when you roll up on there. I mean, it's football Americana. It's about one of the quietest stadiums that I've ever been part of. I don't know, maybe the average age of the season ticket holder 62, but they don't make a lot of noise at Lambeau. But I love the place. Ford Field's been the wild card here
Yeah.
because even when they walked off on us and won for the first time in a year in 2021, it was loud and it wasn't even close to full. Now that it's full and they know they're good, not only is it loud, but they're starting to get Philly
Definitely.
loud on social media. So now they're starting to
It's
really
so
like,
true.
hey, I can talk trash. This is
Yeah.
fun. Wow, where's this been? So we saw a little of that last year, and then you get to U.S. Bank Stadium, and the Vikings, from a radio and TV standpoint, a fan base standpoint, polling, and just it's everything to a majority of the fans. They love the Wolves, they love the Wild, they love the Twins, they love the Lynx, they love the Loons, they love the Gophers, the whole thing. But it starts and stops with Minnesota Vikings football year round.
Yeah.
And Paul, just I would be remiss not to bring up the fact that obviously the Vikings went through trying to get a new stadium for a while. Were able to get that under the leadership of Kevin Warren. Now, Kevin Warren, obviously with the Bears, kind of doing the same thing. Looks like they're kind of trending towards going to Arlington Heights. But for Bears fans, it's kind of been a long, kind of drawn out process where they kind of haven't really been able to kind of see the fruits of that labor. Now with the kind of the fruits of the labor is paying off for the Vikings with the U.S. Bank Stadium, which is, like Carmen said, maybe the coolest atmosphere or the coolest game day presentation. How much has that kind of benefited the game day experience going back from the old Metrodome into this awesome new, kind of it was a kind of a block that they were able to kind of make out of it, right? They were able to kind of mold it
Yeah.
into what they wanted to do with all the best aspects.
Well, it's not dissimilar to Soldier Field. Now, I mean, they don't look alike at all, but Soldier Field's on a very small footprint, and the parking around it is correct me if I'm wrong, but really hard to find. There aren't like big
Yep.
Arrowhead Stadium like lots. Same thing with U.S. Bank Stadium, where it is a small footprint, and for the fans, instead of it really going back like that, it kind of goes up. So even in the top level, there aren't terrible seats. So that's good, and it does get loud. You mentioned the name Kevin Warren. When he was chief operating officer here, I mean, I love him. I got really close with Kevin despite not being a team employee. I know Carmen knows him, and the reason that I know Carmen knows him because I first met Carmen in Indianapolis, Indiana, at Courtney Cronin's women in football event at
Yep.
a little bar close to the stadium. And Kevin came that year, and he came last year. And he comes not to be seen; he comes to help, and he comes just to lay it out like, "What can I do to serve you?" And a lot of my servitude with the way I kind of explained things earlier, professionally speaking with the Vikings, I learned from Kevin and just listening to him and a lot of things that he would say on these long bus rides from airports and stuff like that. So I love him, and if something's going to be done, the right thing's going to be done for the fans and the team and the bottom line. It takes Kevin, with all due respect, forever to make a lot of decisions, simply because it's every little thing he's going to make sure that he has mastered, not make sure he wins, make sure he masters it. So whatever is going to happen, Kevin will get there to the finish line. But the metaphorical moguls along the way, may be tough to endure sometimes. Personally speaking, being an old guy in this conversation, I mean, I remember Brent Musburger. You are looking live at Soldier Field in downtown Chicago, and there were the columns, and it was just unbelievable, man. So it's not like that there now, but I still love being there, and it's a rare stadium where the fans are so close to the benches, and believe me, the players hear it. But I like that. That's part of the game. That's just part of the fan experience. So I don't know what Kevin and the team are going to do. If they go to Arlington Heights, they go to Arlington Heights. I'll call the games there if I'm still doing the job. But I do have Soldier Field deeply rooted in my heart.
It's deeply rooted in all of Chicago's hearts because it's one of the few stadiums that's really in the middle of the city, just like Minnesota's is. But Paul, thank
Yep.
you so much for taking this time to hang out with us during this dead period, during the vacation period. We don't take that for granted at all, and we are so excited to hear your calls this season and see you on the road this year. So thank you again.
Carmen, Mike, you guys are awesome. Call anytime.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you so much again to Paul Allen, the voice of the Vikings. We have referenced so many different calls that he's made, just even talking with him off air. If you've never tuned into a Vikings game for the radio call that Paul does, you really should. He says what every fan is thinking, and it's phenomenal. I really enjoyed that conversation too because he's so close to the team and is really in tune with, like he said, the fan. He's just a great guy to talk to when you're trying to get to know the Vikings and especially what their culture is like and all the things that don't show up on a box score, right, Norm?
Yeah, I am just so fired up for week one after talking to Paul, right? Like,
I
Bears
know.
Vikings is just such a good matchup usually, but to be able to really kind of have the history told by two of the best play by play radio men out there, and Paul Allen, and of course, Jeff Joniak for the Bears, those guys in my mind are very similar in the sense that they just, they kind of wear their heart on their sleeve, they wear their emotion on their sleeves, and just be able to talk to Paul Allen and just kind of get his perspective of the Vikings going into the season. I feel like we have a good, kind of vibe about where Vikings fans are feeling going into this season. But like I said, it's just a treat. It's one of those things that I don't think people should take for granted. In football, you always have the national broadcast, right? And it's one
Right.
thing, like those guys on Fox and CBS, NBC, ESPN, they all do a great job. And they're obviously very specific to their brand. But in football, having that local guy that is your radio broadcaster that shows the emotion of the fan, that's yelling, no, no, right? Or is getting super pumped up. Like, that's so valuable to me. And we've always been lucky enough to have Jeff Joniak as we listen to Bears games growing up. And just kind of, he's obviously been around. Paul's been around for so long, but he talked about it. Paul just said, the connection that fans have. They want to have entertainment. They want to get away. But to be able to have somebody that is that entertaining, that enthusiastic about it, it makes being a fan of one of those teams just that much more enjoyable. And I felt it. I love the Vikings calls. I might have to go back and listen to maybe the Brett Favre
I
call.
know.
Now, I hate to say it, some of his best calls were in the worst moments. And, that's life as a Vikings fan. Bears fans feel that too. But,
I was gonna
it was
say.
so cool to be able to talk with them.
And we're going to continue talking to some of these people that are really really close to these teams within the division in our Rivalry Recon series. So next week, tune in because we're going to have another person from from the Lions rather. That's going to tune in with us and kind of give us the lowdown on what's going on up in Detroit this off season and leading up to this season, which again, there's so much going on for all of these teams. There's so many storylines, and to get some insider knowledge on that, I'm so excited, and it's just going to continue to gear us up
The one thing
for the
that I wanted to point
season.
out, Carm, actually, that I don't know if you picked up on it with our last two rivalry recon guests, but there's also a lot of hatred amongst the division, right? Like we have
Yeah,
Paul Allen kind
these
of
are
tossing
old
some shade at the
teams.
Packers, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like that is the best part about this rivalry recon series that not only are we learning about each team, but you're learning about how much they kind of fear the other teams in the division, right? It's going to be a very competitive division as well.
This and we knew that going in because this was one of the best divisions, if not the best division in football last year as well. But all of these teams are so entrenched in tradition and the stories of, the seasons gone by, and playing in this division for years and years and years. They all have developed a rivalry kind of with each other. I think here in Chicago, you say, okay, the Bears rivals are obviously the Packers. That's one of the most storied rivalries in all of the major sports here in North America. But it's not to say that there's not a little bit of a rivalry with Minnesota. There's not a little bit of a rivalry with the Lions, and they all have their own rivalries with each other because of the tradition that is just steeped in this division. And I think you can say the same about like maybe the AFC North, to some extent the NFC East, but like this is really, I mean, everything from the black and blue division to now, it's got so much context and so much built up history that they can't help themselves but take shots. I mean, even Ben Johnson did it in his introductory press conference, calling out
Right.
Matt LaFleur. Like this is something that everybody kind of buys into, and again goes back to what Paul was saying of, this is for the fans. This is what football is supposed to be. And I just think that the NFC North, completely unbiasedly, it's not like the division I cover or anything, is like just a shining example in the NFL of how football is supposed to be played and how these teams are supposed to play each other. I think it's so fun.
Yeah, it's that shared history, and obviously these teams go back as long as any teams within the NFL. So that shared history, while you also hate those guys, you also
I
root for a guy
know.
like Randy Moss in some ways, right? Or him bringing up the Charles Tillman play against Randy Moss, and Paul talking about how Peanut was one of his favorite players to watch. There's always going to be that mutual respect amongst teams, amongst rivals. You just hope your team gets the better of them, especially come week one against the Vikings on the lakefront, as Paul described. Bears against the Vikings. That's going to be a juicy matchup. We talked about the JJ McCarthy angle. We talked about the Brian Flores angle with Ben Johnson as well. But the lead up is really going to be the most important thing to that, right? You're going to have training
Yeah.
camp. You're going to have Ben Johnson's first training camp, his first time that he's really going to be leading a team. What do you kind of expect from training camp, Carm? As we get a little bit closer, we're inching our ways. We're past the 4th of July. We're almost full go here, about 2 weeks away.
Well, it's interesting because I've had the opportunity to cover the Lions for the last couple of years and therefore see how Ben Johnson kind of operates in regular season practices and off-season practices. And we saw it in OTAs with the Bears that though he's now the head guy, he's the head coach, he hasn't lost any of that intensity. If anything, it's probably kicked up a notch, if that's even possible. But this is what that OTA period was. Yes, it was intense, but the purpose of the OTA period, and this isn't unique to the Bears, this is just true in the NFL, that is your evaluation period, especially for new coaches who are getting to know their roster, getting to know their players, getting to know the strengths and weaknesses of everybody. Ben Johnson mentioned that each individual player is going to have a plan to not only raise their ceiling, but raise their floor. And it's going to be specified to each individual. It's not just, hey, all DBs are going to go do this, all offensive linemen are going to do that. It is individual, which I think is incredibly, it's hard to pull off. It means it's a lot of work for the coaching staff to pull something like that off, but it does benefit the individual, because which then benefits the collective, because not everybody learns the same way, not everybody has the same skill set. So it's this giant puzzle that they have to put together. But that period of time is now over. So when training camp comes in, you have the evaluations, you have your kind of report on each guy. This is where the implementation starts. And I expect the intensity to be even more, apparent in training camp, because now you are looking for the execution. Whereas maybe in OTAs, if you make a mistake, you acknowledge the mistake, you correct it, but it's also expected. Training camp is where you're honing it and you have to execute. And so I think that that intensity is going to be even more apparent in Ben Johnson. I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how it's all structured because every coach does it differently between like how many periods there are, how long they are, what order they're in, you can really tell a lot about a coach and what he prioritizes by reading a practice script. So we're going to see that, and it's one of the only opportunities that media has to really be out there for a full practice and see the cadence of everything. So I'm very interested to see. I'm looking forward to it being extraordinarily organized. Like my little type A personality is like, give me all the structure and organization. Because that's who Ben Johnson is, and he's so detail oriented. So I'm so excited for this training camp, but this is really where you're going to start to see some of the execution. And therefore, if you mess up as a player, you're going to hear about it from Ben Johnson if I know him.
Well, all the fans are probably going to get a little dose of that too for everybody that's going to be at
So,
Hallis Hall for the training camps. Might sound a little different than it has in past years, and I'm excited for training camp too. The Chicago Football Show is excited for training camp because we're going to be out there at Hallis Hall coming up in a couple weeks. So stay tuned with us. You can always like, subscribe, follow us wherever you get your podcast. Obviously, you can watch us on Marquee Sports Network and on YouTube as well. But make sure to stay with us because we got a couple big weeks coming up with training camp. And it's going to be intense. We know it's going to be intense. At least it was at OTAs. And is that a bad thing, though, Carm? Can that become something where maybe there's a coach that's trying to prove himself in his first year? And we know that Ben Johnson has the resume. He has credibility. But can there be a little bit of doing too much, at least early on? I know that intensity is good. But sometimes I wonder if like you kind of hit the ground running a little too fast sometimes.
yeah, and I think that that's always a concern when you have a first time head coach. But you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Mike, where he's coming in with a track record. We know that a Ben Johnson offense scores points. We know that he is very creative and innovative, and he showed that he can make things work with different personnel and do all these wonderful things as a coordinator and create a really potent offense from scratch, which I think is the biggest part that kind of gives me optimism, faith, whatever you want to call it, in this offense and in Ben Johnson's transition into a head coach, because he really is one of those coaches that takes into account his personnel and kind of devises his offense based on what he has available. He doesn't just have a rigid system that he's trying to fit every player into. And players take notice of that. It helps them trust you more too, which is really important when you're talking about going into your first training camp, being really intense, getting on guys for the details. I mean, this is a guy in Ben Johnson that loves his players hard, but he also rides them like really. He's going to hammer home all of the details. He's going to hammer home all of the little things because those all add up. And we've seen that. And that's going to look different and that's going to be different from what happened last year. So the guys that were on the team last year, I mean, I think they probably got a dose of it in OTAs because the Bears had a wonderful turnout as far as the guys that showed up for the voluntary period and all of that. But that's going to continue. And yeah, it's all about how you keep that trust and build that trust from a coaching standpoint. But I think Ben Johnson understands that. And something that he had to do in Detroit, because as wonderful as a head coach as Dan Campbell is, he gives his coordinators a lot of autonomy to kind of run that side of the ball. So Ben Johnson got an opportunity to run the offense. And of course, Dan Campbell had some of the final say in those decisions, especially in game and situationally and all of that kind of stuff. But it was really Ben Johnson's baby, the offense was. So that was, he had autonomy. He had the attention of the team. He knows how to work a room and to get guys fired up. But I really do think that because he's coming in with a track record and a really impressive one at that, that will get him trust through training camp. Now, if they lose 4 of the first 5 games, 5 of the, like, God forbid,
Could
then
happen.
I
It could
think
happen.
that's when the foundation you're setting now is going to be tested, and that's more what I would be concerned about down the road is, can you withstand that with not a whole lot of context, at least firsthand. The Detroit Lions did it. I keep bringing up when Ben Johnson took over that offense, they started 1-6 that year. But I was in that locker room when they were 1-6. You wouldn't have known it. They all believed in themselves. Now, whether that was Dan Campbell or Ben Johnson, I don't know the answer to that question. So that's what Ben Johnson is going to have to build up. But I don't think we're going to have that concern through training camp.
Yeah, and I would probably argue that it's probably easier to pull off a little bit than have to ramp up intensity, right? Most coaches that
For sure.
aren't intense or aren't, detail oriented as maybe Ben Johnson is, it's harder to teach that than it is to maybe pull off a little bit and learn to delegate, to give a little bit more responsibility to your other coaches that maybe comes with experience. You hear that a lot with first-time head coaches when they look back, they're like, oh, maybe I could have delegated a little bit more. So we'll see. I think it's obviously going to be a learning period for Ben Johnson, and we'll see maybe some bumps in the road. But at the end of the day, like you said, a coach like Ben Johnson, who has the resume, who has the experience, is going to be better off than a guy that maybe is doing this without all of those in his back pocket. So I think it'll be interesting. I think it will be different at training camp, though, with Ben Johnson there. And I look forward to it. I think that, like we talked a little bit about with Paul Allen, the Bears in the coaching aspect have needed to catch up here. And they kind of needed to get a guy that is going to be on the same level as Kevin O'Connell or Matt LaFleur or Dan Campbell. So we'll see if Ben Johnson proves to be that guy. The other thing that I just wanted to hit on, Carm, before we wrap up here, an interesting topic, an interesting ranking. The summertime is when all the articles come out, and we love to do power rankings. We love to do all
Oh
that.
no.
But PFF
Oh no.
loved the
July
PFF
power
put out
rankings,
their
Norm.
rankings. I
July
know.
power
And
rankings.
PFF put out their rankings of offensive lines. And we know July is a lot different than January or February, as it might be. But the Bears ranked by PFF as the number 4 offensive line going into the season, with all the additions that were made in the offseason via free agency, a couple in the draft. Carm, what's your reaction to the Bears being up all the way to number 4 on the offensive line rankings?
This might come as a surprise to people that follow me, that follow my work, because you know how incredibly, like, I've made it my mission in my career to give proper credit to offensive linemen and offensive lines in general, because I truly do believe that you're nothing as a team without a strong offensive line. And so, with all of the additions that the Bears made on paper, you would think I was absolutely like not worried, so optimistic, this, that, and the other. And you would be right to an extent. However, let's not count our chickens before they hatch, because the offensive line, an offensive line is unlike any other position group in football in the sense that it requires 5 guys working seamlessly together as one. And that's really hard to do right away with guys that have never played with each other before. So while each individual offensive lineman now on this line probably has top 5, top 10 PFF grades at their respective positions, and that's kind of, I think, where these rankings come out, is like, well, on paper, this guy was the 4th best guard in the league, and this guy was the 10th best
Right.
tackle. That's great. But individual success means nothing as an offensive lineman if you can't come together as 5 guys, sometimes 6, sometimes 7, uh, in a game. And that's what we haven't seen yet. So while the Bears went out and did exactly what I wanted them to, especially when it comes to Drew Dahlman and getting a center that can really take some work off of Caleb Williams' plate, because he understands the checks and the protections and the identifications that need to be made at the line, and some of those decisions he can make himself. He's never played with Joe Tooney. He's never played with Jonah Jackson. So all of these guys that are now in this group together are new, and they have to learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, where they have to take, maybe they have to put a little bit more on their plate for the guy next to them in these certain situations, versus, you're playing with guys on either side of you that you're just not familiar with. So I'm looking forward to, no, the one thing that does make me optimistic is that we know who the starting 5 are, right? Like, for the most part, I think that there's some competition, obviously, at left tackle, and and you're thinking about, oh, is Darnell Wright moving? Blah, 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 blah. But you basically have an idea of who the 5 starters are going to be. And getting those reps in training camp is going to be absolutely crucial to learning how to play together so that you can hit the ground running and be the 4th best offensive line in the league come season.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaway, I think, like you said, from this is it might take time. And if the Bears
Yeah,
end up being the fourth best offensive line by the end of the year, of course, that's going to be awesome. But the rankings right now, it's like I can't buy
it
into
doesn't
it.
really
For my
mean a
own
whole
personal
lot.
sanity, I can't do it. I just can't buy into it.
No,
Like, tell me they're the fourth best at the end of the year, and that's fine. I know, like we said, it's the dead period of the year. It's July. We got to rank everything. Everything's got to be put in context. I get it. But I can't buy into this right now. Like, play a couple
no.
games, show me that you can stay healthy. So it's
Look
obviously
at
fun
you,
to talk
Norm,
about. And
being
I,
reasonable, rational,
Carmen, you're rubbing off
realistic.
on me. You're rubbing off on me. I think I'm going to go watch some Devin Hester highlights after this. I'm going to maybe watch some Charles Tillman,
Tear yourself.
Randy Moss interception highlights. We're going to get a little crazy after this, but yeah, I'm going to be logical, at least for now. Check back in 2 weeks when we're at training camp if that still stands.
I love it. I appreciate it, and I do. I think just in general, it's a great kind of approach to be a little bit more realistic when it comes to, hey, a lot of changes happened this off season. It's going to be an exciting season, but it may not look like we think it's going to look, or like it looks at the end of the season at the beginning. So have some patience, Bears fans. I know I preach it week in and week out, but I think it's true, and I really do think that we will be rewarded come the season's end. But for right now, it's the end of this episode of the Chicago Football Show. Tune in next week. We will have another installment, like I said, of the Rivalry Recon series. This one kind of covering the Detroit Lions. For Mike Norman, I'm Carmen Vitali. See you next week.